The reason you're not probably scaling isn't probably a lack of system, to be honest. It's probably a lack of sovereignty. Now, you build a business that requires your permission to succeed. So every time you jump in to help, every time you answer the question or solve the problem, make the call that someone else should be making, you're not actually being a leader, you're being a bottleneck. So if the machine stops the second you stop looking at it, you don't own an asset, you actually own a high stress babysitting service. I'm Spencer Combs, the Defiant Coach, and this is Spencer Uncensored, episode 112, where we talk about the real reason your business isn't giving you the profit, productivity, and or the purpose you hoped for. And it's probably not even what you think it is. So before we get into this episode today, I want to acknowledge a couple things. So this is the episode, or episode 5, if you will, of 5 in the business arena sequence. So we teach 5 business arenas. We teach that at the Unshakable Weekend event. We also go deep into it on the Unshakable Business Intensive. Over the last 5 weeks, right? So the 4 weeks before this, we went through the arena of excellence, the arena of exposure, which is sales and marketing. We went over the arena of experience, which has to do with your customer experience, the arena of expertise, which was just last week, and now today, the arena of executive. So these are 5 arenas, 5 weeks of frameworks, patterns, diagnostic questions, and things that you can actually act on. So if you've been following along, you've done a significant amount of internal work probably, and I don't take that lightly. So, I appreciate that. Most people in your market never go this deep. And next week, in episode 113, I'm gonna step back from the frameworks a little bit, and then talk about all 5 of these arenas and what they have in common, and why the hardest seasons in your business might be the most important ones. So don't miss that one. Right now, episode 112, the arena of executive, right? The executive arena, however you want to say it. But um, I need to be clear about what this arena is actually about, because most business content treats executive or operations like a logistics problem, right? So like better SOPs or standard operating procedures, right? Better tech or different kinds of tech, especially with the conversation around AI these days, better dashboards, get the right project management software, and suddenly the business runs itself. That's not what this arena is going to be. The arena of executive, as we teach it, is about governance. It's about how you steward the energy and the capital of the machine that you've built, not just how you manage it, and the tasks inside it. It answers a question that most operators never actually ask themselves. Am I running this business, or is this business running me? So let me introduce you to the operational ghost, right? It's a concept we call the operational ghost, and I want you to decide honestly which side of this definition you're on, right? So an operational ghost is an owner who is physically present but strategically invisible. The business only runs because they're in the room, right? Remove them for a week, take a real vacation, not a working vacation, where you bring your laptop and you check your phone every 20 minutes. Uh, if you go on a real vacation and then the gears stop, the decisions are piling up, team members are freezing up, the income becomes a fire, right? The owner comes back to a disaster and tells themselves they can never leave again. Sound familiar? Here's the cruel irony of the operational ghost. The owner usually thinks their constant presence is a sign of high standards. It's a sign of that they care, of leadership. And cultural gravity reinforces that story every time. It tells you that if you step back, things will fall apart, man. You can't. And it uses every time that actually happened as evidence. So you stay, you answer the questions, you make the calls. You're going to just jump right in. And the team never builds the capacity to function without you, because you never gave them the chance. The operational ghost isn't absent. They're everywhere, and they're exactly the problem. So the goal state, the thing we're building toward in the arena of executive, is what we call the ghost presence. It's your standards, your logic, your decision-making framework, so deeply embedded in the team and the systems that the business operates as if you're in the room, even when you're 1,000 miles away. And not because you're checking in constantly, because you've built the architecture that doesn't require you to. So here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to introduce a second concept that explains how the operational ghost gets created in the first place. We call that decision debt. Then I'm going to run all 4 patterns through the arena of executives so you can see exactly which version of the problem is probably yours. And I'm going to give you 2 specific things you can act on this week, just like we've done for the last 4 episodes here, to start building ghost presence regardless of which pattern you're going to run. So let's cover this conversation real quick about decision debt. Every time a team member comes to you and asks, how should I handle this? You have a choice. You can give them the answer, or you can give them the framework. And most operators give the answer because it's faster. It's easier. Let's be real. Like, it's just a whole lot. Sometimes it's just easier because you're already your cognitive load is so high. You're just like, hey, let me just give you the answer. And it feels like leadership too, because you're giving the answer. And in the short term, it works. The problem gets solved. The client gets taken care of. This situation gets handled. But here's what actually just happened. And I need you to lean in on this and think about this for a second. You just took out a high interest loan. You answered the question, but you didn't transfer the thinking that produced the answer. So tomorrow, when a similar situation comes up, the team member will ask again. Think about that with your children. If you keep solving their problems all the way up into their teens and into their adulthood, you become the bottleneck. Day after day, week after week. And before long, you're spending the majority of your executive time answering questions that your team should be handling independently. Not because your team is incapable, but because you never gave them the framework to make the call themselves. Excuse me. That compounding cost of giving answers instead of frameworks, that's decision debt. And it accumulates quietly too. You don't notice it until the debt's so large that you're spending 100% of your executive capacity just paying the interest, answering the questions, solving problems, jumping in, and there's nothing left over for the actual work of governance, which is capital allocation, strategy, and the next level of growth. So every time you answer the question instead of teaching the framework, you take out a loan, your team pays back in dependency, and you pay it back in time. What the arena of executive actually covers is 3 things. So these are 3 things that you should be doing. This is what the executive arena is. First, it's leadership structure, how authority is distributed in your business. So who makes the decisions, and whether those decisions are made based on embedded standards or based on whoever happens to be in the room. The second thing the arena of executive covers is operational governance. So this is systems, rhythms, accountability structures that allow the machine to run without constant intervention. Not just the SOPs, it's the decision-making architecture underneath them. And third, the third piece to the arena of executive, it covers resource stewardship. So how you allocate 2 most finite resources you have as an executive. That's your capital and your time. This is covered in our 5 building blocks, and the third one when we talk about power, right? It's accountability for resources. So it's a financial problem. Every hour you spend answering questions your team should handle is an hour you're not spending in the activities that actually grow the business. Cultural gravity in the arena of executive is particularly seductive because it disguises dependency as dedication. I'm going to repeat it. Cultural gravity in the arena of executive is particularly seductive because it disguises dependency as dedication. It makes the operational ghost feel like a committed leader. It makes decision debt feel like like you're a good boss. And it keeps you exactly where you are, involved in everything, in control of nothing, and scaling nowhere. Cultural gravity doesn't make you a prisoner in your own business overnight. It does it one answered question at a time, which is kind of hard to swallow. So, as you've known from the last four episodes here, we've actually applied the four frameworks to this arena, and that's what we're going to do now. So, let's talk about this. We always start off with the unqualified champion, and if you're not familiar with the qualified champions framework and mastery and how we talk about that, you can go to spencercombs.com and get more info about it. You can actually take an assessment that takes about 3 to 5 minutes over at unshakablesecrets.com that tells you more about it. But this is the four quadrants, and this is applied to the arena of executive. So the unqualified champion is going to be that top left quadrant, if you remember, and you're essentially going to become the firefighter. So listen in and see if this feels like you. If not, I promise you're going to find yourself in one of these four, right? So if you're the unqualified champion in the arena of executive, that's the pattern you're running. You lead by inspiration and you manage by crisis. Your energy is probably magnetic. Your vision is entirely real, and your team genuinely wants to follow you. The problem is that your operating system changes every Tuesday, right? A new idea comes in and priorities shift. A client situation flares up, and you're in the middle of it, solving it personally, showing everyone how it's done. And then a team member struggles, and instead of building the framework that addresses the gap, you step in and handle it yourself because you can do faster. You can do it better. And right now, that just feels like the most efficient path. Like, let me just go ahead and handle this. So you're a firefighter. The business doesn't run on your systems or any system. It runs on your energy. And your team has learned that the best strategy is to wait for you to weigh in before they act. Because the direction changes so often that the independent action feels a little risky. They're not underperforming. They're adapting to the environment that you created. Cultural gravity, it's going to tell you that your involvement is your greatest leadership asset, that your team needs your energy to stay motivated. If you step back, the momentum is going to die. That's the lie that you're hearing from cultural gravity. What it's not telling you is that your team is exhausted, not from the work, from the uncertainty, from never knowing what the system is, because the system is you and you keep changing. So you don't have a motivation problem on your team. You have a consistency problem in your leadership. Your team is performing exactly as your environment has trained them to. Now, just like we've done in the last four episodes here, I'm going to give you 2 fixes for each one of these patterns. So for you, if you're in this unqualified champion pattern where everything's about positivity and energy, got all the mindset, cool. What I'm going to ask you to do is pick one recurring decision that your team asks you about every week, and then build 1-page decision framework for this week. Not an SOP, it's a framework. What's the principle behind the decision? What are the 2 or 3 criteria that determine the right call? Write it down, share it, and then let the team make the next 5 of those decisions without you. Goal is not to remove yourself from leadership. It's to make your leadership more replicable, right? Replicated. The second thing you can do if you're in that quadrant is implement a 24-hour hold before you jump into any situation your team should be able to handle. You hired the right people. Give them 24 hours to see if they can't figure it out on their own. Not forever, just 24 hours. In that window, ask, does this actually require me, or does it require a framework I haven't built yet? That question alone will show you exactly where your decision debt is probably going to be at the highest. Pattern number two. Let's throw it on. We've been doing the same pattern or the same order each time. So let's talk about the qualified victim. That's going to be the bottom right quadrant, right? That's going to be the high mechanics, low mindset conversation. Burnout is very prevalent for these people. Um, it's a feeling like they're in a rut, glass ceiling situations, right? Because they get the results, but they can't seem to ever get past the glass ceiling. So if you're in that arena here in the executive, you've probably built more operational infrastructure than anyone else in the peer group, right? You got SOPs probably, and you have checklists, you have documented processes, and probably a project management tool that's more sophisticated than most companies twice your size. And you still check everyone's work. Not because the work is wrong, but because you can't fully trust that your standard will hold without your verification. So all the processes and procedures, they exist, but there's also your review at the end. So the checklist exists, but you skim it anyway to just make sure, right? The process is documented, but the process still runs through you because the signal that you're sending off, right? The final sign off is yours, and everyone knows it. So you built a beautiful machine and then installed yourself as a required component. And the business looks systemized from the outside. From the inside, it still depends on you. So you're a micromanager, naturally. Not because you don't trust your team, but because you don't fully trust the architecture you've built to hold the standard without your presence, of course. Cultural gravity likes to keep it that way by surfacing every time something slipped through the cracks as evidence that your oversight is in fact necessary. Here's what's going to cost you, though. It's not just time, though it is costing you enormous amounts of time, I'm sure. It's costing you the next level. Remember, we said glass ceiling, right? Because the qualified victim in the arena, in this particular arena, has built a ceiling directly above their head, and then they just called it a roof. The business doesn't, the business you've built can only grow as large as your personal bandwidth allows. And you've been operating at capacity for longer than you really probably want to admit. So you built the prison, you designed the cell itself, you convinced yourself that staying in it is somehow it's how you protect your work, right? It isn't. It's how you limit it. So two things you can do. One, fix number one would be identify one of the areas where your review is the final step in a process that your team should own completely. So this week, remove yourself from that final step. Not permanently, just for 2 weeks. Let the standard hold or let it fail. Either outcome is information you need, because if it holds, you've just freed yourself up. If it fails, you've identified a specific framework gap that you can actually address now. That's number one. Number two, have an honest conversation with your team, specifically your top team members, probably, right? Talk to them about decision debt. Now, you don't have to use the words decision debt because they don't know what the heck that is. And ask them this: what decisions do you currently escalate to me that you feel like you should be able to make on your own? Their answer is probably they're going to tell you exactly where your authority transfer is incomplete and where the next layer of ghost presence needs to be built. It's probably right there inside of your team. All right. Pattern number three, unqualified victim. Low mechanics, low mindset. These are protected patterns. These are people that are wishing things are going to get better. You are probably abandoning your team on a regular basis. So if you're an unqualified victim in this arena, you've confused delegation with disappearance. You hand things off and then you check out. Not because you trust the team to handle it, but because the discomfort of governance feels overwhelming and stepping back feels like relief. Now, if it's not you, we've all known that person before. That was a leader in our organization, right? The problem is that stepping back without building the framework first isn't delegation. That's abdication. The team doesn't have the decision-making architecture they need. The standards haven't been defined. The accountability structures don't exist. So they do their best with what they have, which is usually a combination of guesswork, precedent, and whatever feels least likely to cause a problem. And you assume things are fine until they're not, right? Until the bank account number surprises you, until a client situation escalates so far past the point where it should have been, it finally gets caught, right? Until a team member makes a decision that would have been obviously wrong if anyone had identified that obviously wrong looked like. Cultural gravity is going to tell you that your team should be able to figure it out. The good people don't need to be micromanaged. That if you hire the right people, the rest takes care of itself. That's particularly true, or partially true, really, and completely dangerous without the governance layer underneath it, right? Good people in a system with no decision framework will make good faith decisions that produce bad outcomes. Not because they're failing, because the architecture failed them. So you didn't delegate, you disappeared. And the difference between those two things is the framework you never built before you left. A couple of things you should be doing. Fix number one, pick one area of the business you've stepped away from and do a 30-minute honest audit this week. Not a performance review, a governance audit, right? Does the team need what the standard is in this area? Of course they need it. So do they know what that standard is in the area? Is there a defined decision framework, or are they just improvising? You don't have to rebuild everything this week. You just have to see what's actually there. That visibility is probably going to be your first act of real governance. This, in every one of our programs, we start off with what's called getting real or reality check. And that's what that is for you. You need a reality check. Second thing you can do is implement one weekly rhythm. So a standing 30-minute check-in, a weekly metrics review, anything that creates a regular governance touch point. Not to micromanage like the qualified victim, but to signal that the standard exists and someone is actually watching it. So the unqualified victims team doesn't need more supervision. They need to know that governance is present. That alone is probably going to change behavior. So that's your group. Maybe you're not any one of those three. Maybe you're already in the qualified champions quadrant, right? That's the top right quadrant. So you architect, you're an architect of sovereignty. So if you're the qualified champion in the arena of executive, you figured out the thing that takes most operators a decade probably to learn. Your job is not to actually run the business. Your job is to build the architecture that runs the business without you having to run it personally every day. I work with a lot of real estate agents because of one of the roles I have, and I tell them all the time, you don't sell real estate. I heard this a long time ago from someone, but I remind them of this. You don't sell real estate as a real estate agent. You own a business that sells real estate. And that's a subtle, that's a not so subtle identity shift, right? So if that's you understand you're building something. You've done the work to embed your standards, your logic or your decision-making framework, right? Into the team and into the systems. You don't answer every question. You build the frameworks that allow your team to answer them. You don't make every call. You create the criteria that make the right call obvious. And your ghost presence is real. The business reflects your thinking even in the rooms when you're not in it. So this frees you to operate at the level of the arena or in the arena of excellence, what you're actually designed for, right? The governance of capital and strategy. So where's the money going and why? What's the next constraint in the business and how do we design around it? what's the investment that unlocks the real or the next level, if you will? What's the risk profile of making that particular decision, right? What are the executive questions? Most operators never get to ask them. They're too busy answering operational ones. Now, if this is you and you're doing well in this arena and you're growing, cultural gravity still is going to pull on you too. Okay. And it shows up as over engineering. So building governance structures so complex that they become their own form of bottleneck, that's a problem. It shows up as distance, right? So much ghost presence that you lose the human connection that makes the culture feel more real. And it shows up when you scale the client load or the team size past the point where your current governance architecture can hold the standard. So we have to have that planning and execution and feedback that's required at the top of the mastery cycle we talk about. The machine that worked at 10 people doesn't automatically work at 25. So the architect of sovereignty has to rebuild the architecture at every new level. It's a constant conversation. So you don't manage tasks, you build decision engines. And the quality of your sovereignty is measured by how well the machine runs when you're not watching it. So here's move number one you can do. Conduct a quarterly survey audit. Ask yourself honestly, what decisions are still coming to me and what shouldn't be, right? Where's the framework missing or unclear? What would need to be true for me to step back one more level in this arena or in that particular area? The architect of sovereignty is never finished building. They're always looking for the next layer of authority that they can transfer without losing the standard. So conduct a quarterly sovereignty audit. The second thing you can do is build one decision engine this quarter, a documented framework for a high frequency, high stakes decision category that currently requires your judgment, right? We're not talking about a checklist necessarily or a framework. Well, no, we are talking about a framework, not a checklist, right? A framework, the principle, the criteria, the boundaries, the escalation path. These are all things that make your thinking replicable. That's the most valuable thing you can build as an executive. More valuable than any system, tool, or even a hire. Here's what connects all four of these patterns and what cultural gravity does in the arena of executive specifically. So cultural gravity in this arena doesn't make you a bad leader. It makes you a necessary one. And that's more dangerous because a necessary leader feels like a valuable leader. Being indispensable feels like security. Being the one everyone comes to feels like authority. And none of those feelings are wrong. They're just not sovereignty, which is what you're really after. Sovereignty is when the business produces results without requiring your heroism, without requiring your constant presence, your constant answers, your constant intervention. A business that needs you to be a hero every day is not an asset. It's a dependency. And dependencies don't scale. They exhaust you. So I'm going to ask you something real on it. Let's be real. If you took 2 weeks completely off, no email, no Slack, right? No check-ins, what would happen to your business? Not what you hope would happen. What would actually happen? Your answer to that particular question is your real score in this arena of executive. Not your revenue, not your team size, not your systems documentation. Whether or not your business can hold its standard without your daily presence. That's the metric. That's the sovereignty. The goal of the arena of executive is not to build a business that you can run. It's to build a business that can run with or without you in the room. So here's the diagnostic question. I want you to kind of sit with this for the week. Where's your business, or where in your business are the operational ghosts? And what is one decision framework you could build this week to start replacing your presence with your architecture? Now, you don't have to solve sovereignty this week, okay? You just have to find one place where your answer has been substituting for a framework and then build a framework instead. It's one decision, one page, one transfer of authority. That's the first act of ghost presence, and it compounds from there. The Defiant Assessment at unshakablesecrets.com, it's going to show you which pattern you're running in your arena of executive right now. So 3 to 5 minutes. Link's going to be down in the description. And then next week, episode 113, we're going to be stepping back from the arenas entirely. All 5 weeks, right? 5 frameworks. And I want to talk to you about what all of it actually has in common and why the hardest seasons in your life might be the most important ones. That episode is one you're probably going to want to share. So don't miss it. I'm Spencer Combs, the Defiant Coach. Stay defiant, and I'll see you next Wednesday.